so that this product appeals to and fits the needs of the average Indian army. So taking this platform to the next level and kind of encompassing the user with it. It is a very, very powerful application that just hasn't been harnessed in the right way.
It also sort of personalizes the internet for you, right? Because it understands you, it suddenly can negate everything that's not relevant to you.
The browser with extensions. And those extensions can take the form of, say, content, can take the form of gaming, can take the form of commerce, can take the form of learning, can take the form of AI use cases.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Our Own Devices. And this time we're going to talk about something we use quite a bit. But over the years, and in fact over the decades, people have recognized that it doesn't get the kind of recognition it should get. And that's the browser. If you talk about your computer, your phone, that is maybe the most used app, but people don't even consider it as an app on the phone. So we're going to talk about a browser, a new browser in town, and a browser that has a very strong India angle. So to talk about Veera, we have Arjun Ghose, who is the CEO and founder of the company. Arjun, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Nandu. Thank you for having me on the show.
So strangely, when I started writing about technology about 2 decades back, browsers were the easiest things to write about. And I've written a lot about browsers. I've tried so many browsers over the years. I know a lot of browser founders across the world. Some successful, some not that successful. I've also tried a few browsers that have come out specifically aimed at India. One event which opened with an Indian flag. So I don't want to get into that. But
Yes.
yeah. But could you talk about a little bit of the concept of Veera? What are you trying to do? How is it different?
Sure. And thank you for that context, Nandu. In fact, you mentioned that you've tried many browsers over the years since the genesis, right? I mean, when I was in my undergrad engineering days, I started my browser journey with Netscape. So that has a
same
place
here.
in my heart, my mind. Yeah, I know. I know. And Mark and recent journey has been so inspiring. And we have borrowed so much of his thinking and his approach in our journey as well, right? But to come to your question, right? Why a browser? What is a browser? So what we're trying to create is basically a homegrown browser made in India for Indians. It has a bunch of features, but essentially that is what the spirit of the company is. That's what we're trying to create. It's the browser is not an easy product to create. It is insanely hard. It was actually the first application on the World Wide Web. If you go back to 30 years back, and we are basically trying to reinvent it and reimagine it in the context of today's applications, today's use cases, today's emerging technologies.
True. And it's also something like it can impact your experience, right? It can make your experience really smooth. It can make your entire computer become slow, right? So it's something, and which means that it is something where a lot of thinking has to go in on how the resources of the device it is in is used, right?
No, absolutely. I think we actually developed this thesis in the early days of the company, right? So for one, I'm like extremely bullish about the future of India and digital consumption in India over the next decade, right? So, but if you kind of double click on that, right, you see that internet penetration is largely a solved problem, especially in mobiles, right? I mean, we're basically very, very mobile centric, and that's what we want to be for the foreseeable future. Internet penetration is solved thanks to Geo and thanks to everybody else who followed suit. What has also been solved is the enabling infrastructure, right? So say, take Aadhaar, take UPI, take banking, all of those are solved, which means that anybody anywhere can do a transaction of any amount using just their mobile phones today. And this is helpful not just in transactions, but also in things like when you want to give rewards back to users. These rails are incredibly helpful. So I think that's where we have an advantage as a country. Now, where we still have a long way to go is basically transactions beyond consumption. We are a country with 650, 700 million smartphones, but spread across, say, 550, 600 million users. Now, despite this, the transacting economy is still a smaller percentage of this if you kind of compare it against like the US, China, or developed countries. We have a long way to go when it comes to transactions, right? Because India is a trust deficit country and so on. But and what compounds this is the fact that the 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 price that companies, that innovators have to bear in distribute their products to the target audience is very high. Okay? Just because if I'm an innovator, I have built an application for the mobile or whatnot, and I want to distribute it. Most of the times I'll have to go through big tech. I'll have to go through Google or Meta to distribute my services. A large section of marketing spend is actually spent there, which inordinately, spikes up the cost of customer acquisition. India is a very high country, as we all know, right? So one of the first things that, I actually, the thesis I developed over my career in the last, decade and a half, is that there has got to be alternate means of distributing goods and services to the next 500 million Indians who have these smartphones, who are digitally very savvy, but have to figure out what matters to them and figure out where, how they can actually behave in a trust deficit economy. Now, the problem is that you don't have a unified platform play in India, which allows innovators to actually distribute their services other than Google and Meta and a few other big plays, right? So that was point number one. That was pain point number one. That was the angle from which we were coming, and that was a problem that we were trying to solve. Now, when we looked deeper, Nandu, we found that there were other inherent problems within users' devices as well, right? I mean, look at these devices. Large section of these 650, 700 million devices are low-end Android devices, which means that they are priced anywhere between, say, 7,500 to 15,000 rupees.
Yeah.
And even though they are getting better with time, you're still kind of looking at phones with very low processor power, right? Very low compute power, which in turn implies that the moment you have 5, 10 applications that you use heavily, and these are hungry apps, right? And as they kind of, they are hungry for resources, it inevitably slows the phones down. Right?
Yeah.
So that was the other pain point that we saw, which kind of, there were clear linkages with kind of the pain point we're trying to solve here. You're looking at a platform play. You're also trying to figure out a way to operate that platform on these low-end Android devices that are resource hungry. What we found, and this was a thesis that we actually tested on the ground and we measured on the ground on phones, we found that what you rightly said, the browser is that first application on the World Wide Web that continues to be used today pretty heavily.
Yeah.
But in India, it is not actually recognized as a category by our users, right? So people associate the browser with the name of the monopoly that offers the browser on Android. But as a result of which, this has obviously caused a lot of inertia around the people who actually offer browsers. The browser has kind of taken that commoditized, white labelish kind of look, which hasn't been innovated on. So the user centricity has been missing for a very long time. Right? Because it's a cash cow. It gets its revenues from search engines. It shows ads, and that's pretty much it, right? But what has been missing is the intent of taking this browser, taking this platform to the next level, and kind of encompassing the user with it. It is a very, very powerful application that just hasn't been harnessed in the right way. And this is why we kind of gravitated towards the browser in the first place. And as we did, we found that there was also a distinctive need to make it very, very personalized, number one, and very localized, number two, for our audience. Look, I'm a very India-centric, India-focused. This is the country I understand best. This is the user base that I understand best. And we are basically what we are building, therefore, is something that caters to the needs and desires of our audience.
And the old saying in the tech industry that if you solve for India, you solve for maybe a third, 3/4 of the world. right?
No, absolutely. I mean, just to kind of expand on that point, we have always received this encouragement from investors and our well-wishers in the ecosystem asking, why don't you go outside India and go into Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa? The same pain points and the same demography, right? And we always push back saying that we want to be focused on India because this is the market we understand best. This is where we understand the ecosystem and ecosystem players the best. And therefore, coming back to your point, if you solve for India and do it the right way, you can take it anywhere in the world and succeed.
Yes. And the other thing you touched upon it also is this interplay, within the browser or within apps. But the browser itself can be a super app, right? And it can sort of give you everything that you do on a phone or even on a laptop, as your Chromebook has effectively shown. The concept of the Chromebook itself comes from that you just use the browser, right? But is that something you're also thinking about, that you in a way, maybe not the right word, but you suck in the user into the browser and keep him there because that's all he needs?
No, I think you've raised a very important point, right? I mean, you're talking about super apps, and I wouldn't use that. I mean, that play has worked out very well in China through WeChat, right?
Yeah.
We actually took a very pragmatic view, and we said, let's give value where value is required, right? So one of the first things we did was just quantitatively measure what our target audience is engaging on their phones. If you look at the average Indians, usage in the day, they are spending like 5 to 7 hours of their digital lives, basically 5 to 7 hours of the day on their digital device, which is a mobile primarily.
Yeah.
Of that, social takes a big cut, like 40-50% of usage is social. Browser and a few other content apps come next, right? And then there's like a long tail. We wore a very pragmatic hat, and we said, we should only solve for problems that exist. We should not solve for converging the social experience onto the browser, because the native user experience is already superior on, let's say, Meta, WhatsApp, and whatnot, right? It remains to be seen how it's going to evolve in the next 10 years. But at this point of time, we felt that the browser could actually converge a lot of other use cases. And therefore, the browser that we are trying to build on the mobile is a browser with extensions. And those extensions can take the form of, say, content, can take the form of gaming, can take the form of commerce, can take the form of learning, can take the form of AI use cases. These are the things that can reside very seamlessly on top of that browser stack, while giving a superior, fast, reliable, stable, private browsing experience to our user, which is the need right now.
Also, I remember having done even a cover story once on the browser wars, right? Because it was there was a time when it was not this skewed, but it's become very skewed now in favor of maybe one browser. Right. So how do you operate in a market like that, where there are still a lot of very good browsers out there which people don't use enough, right? Like there is Opera, there is Vivaldi, there is Firefox, but they have all sort of become smaller players in this sudden Android-led the Chrome world that we all end up in. So how do you operate in a system like that? Because you are in a way swimming against the current, right?
That's a great question. I mean, look, you referred to the browser wars, right? And I'm a big fan of Mark Andreessen's journey. Like when he started off with building Zik and came out and then teamed up to build Netscape Navigator. And we know, what has happened since then, right? Mark basically he was a visionary. He basically said he went against Tim Berners-Lee, who wanted like a text-based browser that was restricted to academia, right? This was Internet 1.0. Mark had a different perspective. He said, look, first of all, this has got to be a GUI-based, a graphical user interface-based system. It has got to be for the masses, right? You cannot restrict it to either the military or the academia, right? That is not the right use case of the browser. He saw it as a ubiquitous application residing on top of the internet and the World Wide Web. He also said that you cannot just make it a text-based browser. You've got to, whatever the user wants to see in their digital lives, you should represent that, whether that's pictures, movies, music, blogs, newspapers. He envisioned all of this will one day reside on the browser, and he went into building the browser like that. Interestingly, he was also building off of his earlier platform Mosaic when he went to build Netscape Navigator, and he was swimming against the tide after his IPO because Microsoft got clued into the whole the opportunity of the browser in a post-internet era. And he still built against that, right? He built it because he was taking a very user-centric approach for the masses for his browser, and we are exactly doing the same thing, right? If Sir Tim Berners-Lee built his first browser at CERN, right? Why did he build it? He built it because he was studying black holes and the Big Bang, the origins of the Big Bang. But it was when Netscape came into play that the Big Bang of the internet actually happened. We think that by taking a very differentiated and a very localized, personalized approach to building a browser in India for Indians with a different set of features, this we consider internally to be the Big Bang moment for digital India over the next decade, right? And the way we are approaching it is by saying, let's not be another copy of the dominant player, right? Everybody's companies are mentioned, phenomenal companies, right?
Yeah.
They've got years, if not decades of experience of building the browser. Unfortunately, a lot of these companies have not actually thought of expanding the scope of the browser or reimagining the scope of the browser in tandem with user needs, because they're global companies, right?
Yeah.
Tastes are different in every place. We have the benefit of actually focusing very sharply on India. We also have the benefit of technology rapidly coming up. I mean, we live in a post-AI world where, who knows, maybe search becomes obsolete or becomes completely reinvented, right? This is the Terminator 2 moment for search. And we think that this is the time, this is the opportunity, this is the moment when we should put a stake on the ground, take a focus on users, take a focus on converging the most important use cases that users actually partake in on their mobiles on top of the browser, create a unified, personalized experience, make this, therefore, a beautiful discovery platform for what appeals to you, right? Maybe a certain type of content appeals to you. Maybe a certain type of product appeals to you. Maybe you are in the right category of people who qualify for a 10,000 rupee working capital loan for growing your business or to run your family. We want to build it in a very personalized and localized manner with Indic languages eventually, so that this product appeals to and fits the needs of the average Indian, the Aam Aadmi, right? This is our play, right? We are not taking a one brush stroke paint all kind of approach. We're taking a very customized approach to building this product, and we want to build this in conformity with Indian users' needs, and we want to build this in conformity with Indian regulations.
The other interesting aspect of what you're saying is that you're also thinking, mobile first or mobile only, right? You are not a browser which has been envisioned, run, tested on desktop, suddenly finding itself on mobile, right?
Correct.
So how is that an advantage, especially in a market like India? See, I run one of India's largest websites. We almost always now have 90% plus traffic coming, from mobile, and I have seen it go up from maybe a 55% 10 years back, right? And all your peaks, all your spikes happen only on mobile, right? And desktop becomes this small thing. We also know it's also very office driven, and like people don't really use desktops when they're home because you see the desktop traffic sort of dip on weekends, for instance. So where the users are and you're building for that, exactly what you said. So how much of an advantage is that?
I think it creates advantage of focus, right? You can create browsers for multiple operating systems. A browser is a hard product. Replicating it for different operating systems is not a small effort, right? And we have learned this. We have therefore put our stake in the ground and said, we want to focus on the 90% of India that you talked about, because that's the user we want to solve for, right? And we don't want to solve for the top 20% or the top 30% of India because they've got many, many tools at the disposal, right? 90% of India are operating on their mobiles. They're actually earning their livelihood on mobiles, as we have seen. What is also an advantage for us is that unlike in desktop, browsers on mobiles don't naturally come with extensions. We are bringing the concept of extensions on mobile browsers, right? And extensions can take multiple forms.
Yeah.
It can be, like I said, content can be an extension. AI is an extension. We're kind of introducing this concept to the user, and we are thinking through the user journey in a manner that they not only are, suddenly disrupted with a new product, they are in their comfort zone of using a product that they always used, but they're getting introduced to new features as we bring them to play.
And I think one last thing I would like to speak to you about is, you have some experimentation happening in the AI space and bringing the browser together. I've used at least one interesting new browser, which is, you can say, is AI led in a way. So is that an opportunity, especially when you're looking at it from the Indian context, where maybe people have really not started using AI the way they can? Is that an opportunity, or is it a distraction right now?
Right. It can be what you treat it as, right? We always have the perspective that you've got to look at where the puck is going and not where it is now, right? So when we started off, 1.5, 2 years back, when AI was not even a thing, we were thinking, where is search evolving? Where are features evolving, right? What is the app ecosystem going to look like in 5, 7, 10 years from now, given the constraints or the limitations of these smartphones that we have in this country, right? And obviously, the AI play completely exploded onto the scene last year. And we found validation of hypothesis. We basically said AI is nothing but an extension of what we were already thinking. What we were thinking is building a discovery platform for use, a rewarded discovery platform, by the way. I'll come to rewards in a bit, but we were thinking of bringing some of the most commonly used, most oft-used applications that can seamlessly integrate with the browser on top of Veera. When AI is no different. AI is basically has an infrastructure layer, and there are going to be multiple applications built on top. How are the next 700 million, 1 billion Indians going to discover that, right? You can push them by spending a ton of money. You can do top of the funnel marketing. You can end up spending, bagfuls of money to reach them. But you're going to get results that are very similar, right? This discovery of products is always going to be difficult. Instead, just like all other use cases we talked about, discovery of applications built on top of AI can also reside on the browser in a very, very similar way, right? The approach we're taking is that this is going to be a smart AI-first browser in the next couple of years, moving not with the times, but thinking ahead of the times, always thinking where the puck is going. AI is not just about AI-driven search. And I'm sure you've used some of that in some of the browsers that are coming up, but also how AI applications reside on top of the browser, right? How do people interact with that, right? How do peer-to-peer conversations happen around that, right? If this happens, I believe that India, my dream is to make India a very AI-first country in the next 5 to 7 years. And that will only happen if people, the common man, has easy and affordable access to applications that are basically being presented by AI.
Yeah. So is it right to say that AI is also adding accessibility, especially in a market like India? And you mentioned discoverability, but it also sort of personalizes the internet for you, right? Because it understands you, it suddenly can negate everything that's not relevant to you. And in India, especially if you go into the language speaking India or the regional language, you suddenly realize that so much of the internet, so much of TV, is not just relevant for the context that most of these people reside in. But we don't get it. We have a very, I keep saying, the Noida focused approach on a lot of things, right? So how is that going to be solved by AI, especially residing on a browser?
I got to say, Nandu, that you have like you've given a lot of thinking to the browser space, and clearly you've kind of studied browsers for a very long time. That's how we're thinking as well, right? Going into regional languages, right?
Yeah.
You, by dint of building this platform, what we are building is a personalization engine, right? Built on top of, browsing data, of search data, of content consumption data, gaming data, commerce data. If you're going to combine all of this, you actually better get a very, very good profile of a user. And therefore, if you leverage AI to build a personalization engine at the back end, which is what we are doing, you can actually put and present the right kind of content or the right kind of offers, goods, services in front of them at the right kind of prices, right? You can work with brands to go from top of the funnel banner ads that are honestly intrusive to the whole experience, to the whole digital experience, to actually understanding your customer, understanding your user very, very shortly, and then showcasing to them only what they're interested in seeing, right? And therefore giving them the most value. This should be a repository of value for our users in the daily lives, not just in consumption, but also in terms of transactions, right? So that's exactly how we're thinking about it. We are working on a very smart personalization engine, leveraging AI, and technologies today abound. So we are taking full advantage of that. And I think as time goes on and as this model learns, we're going to get better and better at it in adding value to our users.
Arjun, thanks a lot. I think our listeners will be, I keep saying that every podcast we do is about knowledge. It's about adding layers of knowledge, and I'm sure people will open up, will start thinking about browsers differently, on the opportunities that lie in going beyond your regular browser. So again, very insightful conversation. So thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. And thank you for having me, Nandu. Would love to talk more whenever you want to. I can just go on talking about this for days.
Yes, I'm sure you can. So you were listening to Arjun Ghose from Veera. We'll be back again with another guest.